You're listening to the We're Talking Sports podcast, hosted by Ben Burns and Richie Donnell. Remember to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and visit our website at mysportstop.com. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here they are, Ben Burns and Richie Donnell.
All right, welcome to another episode of We're Talking Sports.
2 in 1 week.
Two in a row.
2 in a row, that's right. 2 back-to-back shows.
Yeah, if you want to know anything about the NFL, like who we think should make the All-Pro team, MVP, stuff like that, go to our last episode.
The NFL special.
Right. I'll put a link in the comments below, and you can go right there to it.
And our Steve Smith video.
Yes, Steve Smith video. That was fun to make. Little 4-minute video on what we think about Steve Smith because, I mean, he is a big deal.
He is.
And he'll be the first person to tell you that.
Yes, he has no problem with that. And one of the things that we talked about with Steve Smith was his chance of getting into the Hall of Fame. Yeah. Which takes us into the fact that last night, the 15 finalists were named for this upcoming year's Hall of Fame. And I believe that gets voted on right before the Super Bowl.
Yep, the day before.
But I have my list and my votes. I know you have the list as well.
I think I know who I'm putting in.
So should we just go through the names and then say who we would vote for?
Yeah.
So I have written down in order the 3 guys that made it, I believe, are on their first ballot. Mm-hmm. That is LaDainian Tomlinson, Jason Taylor, and Brian Dawkins.
All right.
I have 2 of those guys getting in.
You have 2 of those.
As first ballots.
Okay.
The shocker is probably I do not have Jason Taylor.
You do not have Jason Taylor.
As a first ballot. I have LaDainian, and I have Brian Dawkins.
Right. I think they're all getting in the Hall of Fame eventually. I think that's pretty clear. LT's in. He's getting in this year. Yeah. He's a first ballot guy. We saw Emmitt Smith got in first year. Marshall Faulk got in his first year. Barry Sanders. LT is at that level. Yes. I probably shouldn't be calling him LT because, people of the generation...
There's a couple LTs.
The generation before me, their LT was Lawrence Taylor. My LT was LaDainian Tomlinson. Yeah. So, but LaDainian Tomlinson, he's getting in this year, no doubt.
Yeah. The other ones from past years' holdovers, we have Tony Baselli, Isaac Bruce, Don Coryell, former coach.
Former Chargers coach.
Terrell Davis, Alan Faneca, Joe Jacoby, Ty Law, John Lynch, Kevin Mawai, Terrell Owens, and Kurt Warner. Do you want to start? Who do you think of that holdover group has the best chance of getting in?
Hang on, let me count to make sure I have 5 here.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I have an extra. Okay, I know who my 5 are. Okay. I think out of those people, probably the person with the best chance to get in is Terrell Owens.
Yeah, agreed.
I wasn't surprised that he got in the first couple of years. Talent-wise, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Yes. But remember, this is the media voting, and T.O. was not a fan of the media. You can go back to when he was doing the interview while doing, push-ups or sit-ups, and then the famous interview or press conference with Drew Rosenhaus when Rosenhaus kept saying, "No comment." Yep. Or next question.
And then he did the interview in his driveway doing sit-ups.
That's what I was saying.
Oh yeah,
and then he had in the Cowboys when he was after the playoff loss, he was crying, saying he's my quarterback. Yeah. But he served his time, kind of like how Chris Carter did a couple years ago.
And Marvin Harrison.
But I think this is the year T.O.'s in. Talent-wise, I think he's a top 5 receiver. All time.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think one of the ones that I locked in, I went through and looked at all of their credentials, so to speak, today just to kind of refresh myself. And I think one of the most impressive ones, and he arguably one of the best linemen of our generation, Kevin Mawai.
Oh, yeah.
I have as getting in as well.
A lot of good linemen here.
Between him, Baselli, Faneca,
Joe
Jacoby, to turn any of those guys away is an injustice.
Yeah.
But I think for me, the biggest one that I don't have I don't have John Lynch or Isaac Bruce getting in this year.
Okay. I do have John Lynch getting in. Last couple years, I think the last defensive back to get in was Aeneas Williams.
Yep.
Deion Sanders was kind of in that same area too. He was obviously a first ballot. But now, I'm surprised that Steve Atwater did not make the top 15 here. He's always kind of been a finalist. But yeah, I have John Lynch getting in. I also have Ty Law getting in.
Okay.
To me, Ty Law was one of the best cornerbacks of his time. I mean, it was him and Champ Bailey, in my opinion. And Ty Law was probably, besides Tom Brady, was the best player of that Patriots dynasty.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of anybody else from.
Richard Seymour.
Right. Seymour, Troy Brown,
Matt Light.
But yeah, I think you start with Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And you start with.
And then you got to go Ty Law on defense. Was one of the very few corners that could take on Peyton Manning in the Colts offense.
Right, and beat them.
Yes.
What's your take on Kurt Warner?
Everybody wants to put in Kurt Warner in, right? All the fans do because he's a familiar name.
Right.
He's been in the NFL for a very long time. He's obviously one of the greatest Cinderella stories, probably of all sports.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
Was bagging groceries before he, was signed by the Steelers and the Rams, and won a Super Bowl with them. The problem with that, though, is in between his years with the Rams when he won the Super Bowl, went to another Super Bowl with them, and then to the Cardinals where he again made the Super Bowl, lost to the Steelers. Is in between that, not much was going on.
Right.
Lost his job to Mark Bulger.
Yep.
And then with the Giants, was even worse, lost his job to Eli Manning. So to me, that's a huge, during that long period of time, there wasn't a lot going on.
Right.
And to me, Kurt Warner's eventually going to be a Hall of Famer, but I think he's still got to wait a couple of years.
So you brought up before, with Terrell Owens having to do, pay his dues with the whole situation with the media. Do you think that with Kurt Warner and John Lynch now being members of that media, kind of not necessarily making friends, but John Lynch does, Fox every week. Kurt Warner is on the NFL Network. That they kind of, get that due respect from media members by being analysts and kind of.
I like to think people in the media are non-biased.
Right. Because we had the situation with baseball where Ken Griffey would have been a unanimous vote, but a gentleman came out and said that the reason he did not vote for Ken Griffey was because no player in history had ever been voted unanimous, and he wasn't going to allow that to start. That maybe some guys vote for John Lynch and Kurt Warner for that reason.
I don't know what you're talking about with the unanimous. That's not a very good analogy.
I guess in terms of maybe because they are now members of the media.
No, I don't think they're going to vote for John Lynch because he's his buddy. I think they're going to vote for John Lynch because he was a 9-time Pro Bowler.
Right.
I don't. Kevin Green. I think Kevin Green was one of the nicest guys. One of the nicest football players ever, maybe not on the field, but off the field. Right. And he took a very, very long time before he got in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
So I don't think this is really the case of, Kurt Warner's my buddy. And how many people from NFL Network or Fox are actually going to be voting?
Right.
It's people at, local newspapers, New York Times, Houston Chronicle, places like that. And, guys like John Lynch and Kurt Warner, they're going to be more on the TV.
Right.
Okay.
So a couple of teams have decided already to change their coaches.
Yeah.
And you have already started putting your, candidacy.
Yep. San Diego Chargers just went up today.
But I guess putting you in the GM shoes here.
Yeah.
I believe it's 5 teams are looking for a new head coach.
6.
I'm missing one then. Jacksonville, San Francisco, San Diego, Buffalo, Denver,
Los Angeles,
L.A. Rams. That's the one I missed. If in the GM shoes, besides the candidates that you chose, if you had to pick somebody for each one of these jobs, let's say we'll start with Jacksonville, what do you think that they need an offensive guy? Who's the perfect fit?
With Jacksonville, I think they need to go offense.
Okay.
Especially because right now they don't have anybody helping out Blake Bortles too well, and they need somebody to help develop Bortles into a Pro Bowl quarterback. He has the talent. He has the skill. He also has the receivers with Hearns and Robinson. Julius Thomas also a very good tight end.
Yeah.
So they just need somebody to help, I guess, push him along to become a good quarterback.
Okay. San Francisco.
San Francisco needs somebody not named Chip Kelly. No, but right now I think out of all the teams, San Francisco is the team with the most blank spaces in that they could go anywhere. They need a new quarterback.
Right.
Really, the only sure thing to me on San Francisco is Carlos Hyde.
Okay.
And I don't know how much years he has left.
Right.
Crazy to say, but seems like he just came into the league. But, I mean, with running backs these days, I mean, they can be out within a few years. So, yes, San Francisco, are they drafting? They're drafting second, so
yes.
they're gonna get either Watson or Trubisky.
You would think.
Yes.
You would think. Who knows based on whoever they hire as their GM.
So, in that saying, they should probably get an offensive guy.
Okay.
Or at least a good offensive coordinator.
Right. San Diego Chargers.
San Diego Chargers needs a defense.
Okay.
Right now, their defense is it's not great. I think Casey Hayward was really only their only bright spot last year. In that saying that they can switch to a 4-3 right now just because they don't have many pieces. So maybe a guy like Mike Smith or Sean McDermott.
Yeah, and I think one of the hot names for them was Patricia.
Matt Patricia, another name. Vance Joseph.
Yes. What about Buffalo? They just left the defensive guy.
Yeah.
But the defense seems to be a little bit ahead of the
right
based on the quarterback situation.
I think Buffalo could go either way. Like you said, they just let go of a defensive guy. I would go more towards an offensive guy.
Yeah.
I think Anthony Lynn's a very
would
good
they be
candidate.
dumb to let Lynn go, do you think?
They wouldn't be dumb. I mean, if they find a better candidate.
Okay.
I mean, if they find a better candidate, choose the better candidate. I think Lynn's going to be a head coach this year no matter what.
Okay.
So it's whether or not they want him. They'll have the first opportunity to hire him.
Right. The Los Angeles Rams.
Rams need an offensive guy for sure. They need somebody to push Jared Goff along because they spent a lot of money and a lot of draft picks on him.
Well, and not only him, but I think in terms of everybody, when you look at in terms of the good seasons, bad seasons, breakouts and busts, Todd Gurley has to be on that bust list.
Oh, he had an absolute sophomore slump. I mean, he ran for a little over 800 yards, and that's
he was an All-Pro last year.
800 yards sounds a lot better than it actually is.
Right.
So, yes, somebody needs to help Gurley get back in his groove.
The final team on this list, probably the best team currently available right now, would be the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
And it's kind of seemed to start in a way that I guess everybody expected, where John Elway has once again used a connection to his past to kind of help further the Broncos. And Kyle Shanahan seems to be the hot name here. Is that kind of a done deal, do you think? That's the way
it's definitely not a done deal. No. I mean, they should. I think Denver should take their time on deciding who they're going to hire because, I mean, first of all, I think they need to figure out if Wade Phillips is going to come back or not.
Right.
If he is, then they can go on offense and figure out a guy that can figure out this quarterback situation.
Right.
Is it going to be Simeon or Lynch or somebody else?
Somebody else, right.
And if they have Wade Phillips on defense, you're still going to have that great defense.
Right.
You still have the players, all the Pro Bowlers, and you can maybe have a little bit more freedom, find an offensive guy. If not, they have to open up their candidacy to a little bit of a wider group.
Yeah.
Guys like Vance Joseph or Matt Patricia.
Right. This morning was announced that Jim Caldwell will come back.
Yep.
But it doesn't seem that they are committed to him past next year. He has been in the playoffs twice in 3 years in Detroit.
Yeah.
Is this almost a case of Detroit having too high of expectations? Or if he makes the playoffs again next year, it's almost the same situation with almost where Lovey was fired after a 10-win season. You're almost entering that same boat because it seems, in our lifetime, Detroit has always been the laughingstock. And now to make the playoffs 2 out of the last 3 years is actually a good trend for them to start with.
I think for the NFC North, for the head coaches, they've had pretty much the expectation is one goal in mind, and that's beat Green Bay.
Right.
Who knows if, talk about last week, Week 17, if the Packers beat the Vikings to win the NFC North, we could be talking about if Mike Zimmer's going to be leaving or not.
Right, and they did announce that. They had to announce that he was coming back.
Right.
Because apparently some rumors had started that he was going to get
And that's no surprise because, they won the division last year, and that's kind of their goal. Obviously, losing in prime time on Week 17 in the NFC North title game at home, that's a big loss, even if they're making the playoffs. So if they win this playoff game, it's going to do wonders for Jim Caldwell. If not, it's almost starting back at zero.
So let me ask you this. I know obviously there's a big difference from wins and losses in terms of scale when you look at college to the NFL. In college, we have, I guess, what we would consider, that's a good loss. It was a close game where it's kind of a good loss for a team that might not be expected here. And I think going into this weekend, Seattle will definitely be considered the favorite. And I outside of the city of Detroit, couldn't tell you how many people really think the Lions will win. If this game is competitive and comes down to late in the fourth quarter, could that be considered a good loss for the Detroit Lions? Or at the end of the day, hey, it doesn't matter?
It could depend. It could depend how much the loss is.
Right.
If they get killed like the Chiefs killed the Texans last year, that wasn't even close. It showed them that, Houston didn't belong in the playoffs.
Right.
If it's a loss like that, that's not a good loss. But if it's an overtime game and it's a shootout the entire time, if Matt Stafford proves that he can play against this defense, then it looks a little bit better. But in the end, I think it does come down to winning or losing. So I don't think you can consider anything a good loss.
Right.
It's maybe a not as bad loss.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess for my sake, looking at Chicago season, I have to. That's how I look at a lot of things with them going through a rebuild.
Yeah.
But with Detroit having been so bad for the past 15 years, I guess, like you said, if you're going to the playoffs in 2 out of 3 years, eventually good losses disappear.
Yeah.
And you have to turn those good losses into wins.
Mm-hmm.
The Pelicans, moving on to the NBA, have signed Matajunas, who...
Matajunas?
Yeah, however it is pronounced.
Donatas Matajunas.
Which is just a weird situation.
Yeah.
Because he refused to sign his tender with the Houston Rockets. Mm-hmm. Became a free agent, and apparently the Lakers were willing to offer him a lot of money, and he has decided to go partner up with Anthony Davis. Is this a good move for them? A good move for him?
It seems like the Rockets and the Pelicans keep swapping players.
Yes.
Ryan Anderson and Eric Gordon went to Houston, and now Terrence Jones and Matajunas are with the Pelicans.
Right.
So I don't know. It's certainly he's a good replacement for Ryan Anderson. They're both kind of the same players, stretch fours.
Yeah.
I guess now it depends on how much is he in shape. You know. Obviously they're going to have to start him off with low minutes, and then by the end of the season, hopefully he'll be in rotation. I don't think this is It's certainly not the acquisition that's going to, get them to the next level.
Right.
But it could be a guy to plug in their rotation.
And obviously he turned down a lot of money from Houston based on what a tender is for a first-round player under a rookie deal to sit out and sign for, I think it was $600,000 was announced. Is this a bad move for him? I don't understand. Was this like a try to cash in move that he's trying to do here?
I mean, the way it sounds, I don't think he wanted to go back to Houston.
Okay.
And he, remember at the when he was drafted, he didn't even come to the NBA right away.
Right.
He kind of stayed back. So I don't know what it is about the Rockets or about Houston. But he clearly did not want to be there, so he's gone now.
Okay, so our show has kind of had a staple of contender pretender, which has also now shifted sports. As we were just talking, the NBA season is almost halfway over.
Yeah,
it's cruising by, and teams are kind of starting to separate themselves a little bit. But still, that playoff picture is a little muddy.
Yes.
So we're going to start with the East teams and then jump over to the West.
All right.
So from the East, Atlanta with Paul Millsap.
Atlanta with Paul Millsap, they're definitely contenders. I think they're either 4th or 5th in the conference right now.
Right.
And Dwight Howard's actually playing pretty well. So I'm putting them contender.
Yeah, I completely agree. Contender there because they've been good in the past with Millsap, and he's kind of been that glue guy for them who always seems to play well, doesn't disappear or anything like that. Without Millsap, I think that they would just go straight down. From there.
I mean, it depends what they get back.
Right.
If they get back, a first round pick and a player that they can start, I think they're still contender. I will say they will be contender though without Millsap.
Okay. So the other team, if the playoffs started today, that would be in that 4-5 matchup with the Atlanta Hawks, the Milwaukee Bucks.
I'm going to say contender. I think if Russell Westbrook wasn't having such a monster season, Giannis Antetokounmpo could be in that MVP conversation.
Right.
So, I mean, and he's just playing absolutely out of his mind.
Yep.
And Jabari Parker's doing well, kind of as his Robin.
Right. I'm going to say contender as well. Not just because of those two guys, but the bench has been very good for them this year, and that's something that you need to be able to win throughout the regular season, but into the playoffs as well, whether it's injuries or rest.
Michael Beasley's kind of having a comeback here, too.
Yeah, he's playing very well. Malcolm Brogdon looks to be like an absolute steal.
He already had a triple-double.
And Greg Monroe is I think, almost a double-double a night off the bench as well, which, bodes well for the Bucks. They just have to get this youth movement to continue to roll. You see the growth, but I definitely think they are a contender. The Indiana Pacers have kind of been a team that disappointed a little bit here.
For sure. I'm not sure what's happening with them. I think it has a lot to do with such a difference in point guards. Last year they had George Hill,
right.
who's more of a jump shooting point guard. Now they have Jeff Teague, who drives the ball a lot more than Hill. I'm gonna end up saying contender, just because with the bubble teams right now, out of all those teams, Indiana has the most talent, so they can afford to lose a few games right now. And if they come, I think they can come back after the All-Star break.
Yeah, I agree. I think contender. Solely for the fact of they have the best player of the bubble teams. Maybe not necessarily the most collection of talent. I think the Knicks, with the guys that they have, could be a team that could sneak in. But to me, Paul George is the best player of anybody on any team that's on the bubble right now. And he's the difference maker that makes them a contender to make the playoffs for me, maybe versus a team like the Knicks. maybe making them a little bit more of a pretender.
All right.
That way. The Chicago Bulls.
That's tough. I'm gonna say right now they're pretenders.
Okay.
Like the Pacers, they have a lot of talent, but I don't. I'm a little concerned about everybody else besides Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
I don't know how much Dwayne Wade has left. I think he's kind of playing more of just a leadership role right now, and I don't have much faith in Rondo.
Yeah.
Being a great point guard for the entire season.
Yeah, I'm with you, pretender as well, just because, like you said, when you look at the box scores, it's Jimmy Butler and kind of everybody else.
Yeah.
You don't really have those other guys stepping up where it's needed.
No, and guys like Nikola Mirotic and Doug McDermott, guys who they expected a few years ago to kind of take a bigger role, they're still role players.
Right, and the guys they got back from the Knicks have not quite taken off like they expected, I think, as well, to come in. One of the Jacksons, was it Demetrius Jackson?
I think you're talking about Grant.
Grant, has not played nearly as well as they thought he would coming in and possibly being able to be that backup point guard. Has not done the job that they expected. Moving on to the Western Conference, Oklahoma City.
Thunder are definitely contenders, for sure. Russell Westbrook is, obviously playing just incredible basketball, but on top of that, I think he has a good group of role players that fit kind of this Russell Westbrook system.
Yeah. Yep.
Guys like Oladipo, the other Grant brother, Jeremy Grant, who they got in a trade in the offseason, has been playing very well on the bench.
Yeah.
Roberson, Shane Adams, obviously. He's got a good group with him.
Right.
And obviously, but still, Russell Westbrook's running the show.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I go contender. You had mentioned all the role players that fit this Russell Westbrook style of play, but what scares me the most is the big guys. Enes Kanter and Steven Adams are just absolute monsters down low, and I would not want to run into either of those guys.
Yeah.
And it reminds me similar of what when the Lakers had their quote-unquote twin towers of Andrew Bynum and Paul Gasol playing together when they won the back-to-back championships. If the Thunder get hot, they could be a team to definitely reckon with at the top of that conference. The Memphis Grizzlies.
I'm gonna say pretender. Wait. Yeah. That's tough. The reason, they don't have Mike Conley right now. He's still out. And obviously Vince Carter has been playing very well for them. But I just don't have much faith in everyone else. Zach Randolph's getting up there. He is playing in a six-man role, so he doesn't have as much minutes. They're doing that in hopes if he can play the entire season with energy. I don't know, though. Actually, I will say contender. Because I don't have much faith in the rest of the conference.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say contender because they're kind of the worst of the best. That top 7 in the West is very, very good.
Yeah.
And Memphis is that 7 team. They're just kind of coasting along, beating the teams that they should. So they're a contender there just because the bottom is so bad.
Yeah.
Which gets us to the bottom. And the 3 teams probably that are going to be fighting for this 8th spot. But to start, the team that owns that 8th spot right now, the Sacramento Kings.
I'm going to say pretender because I think this team is going to change a lot by the All-Star break, meaning that they're going to trade somebody. I think they're going to try and ship out DeMarcus Cousins.
Yep.
I don't even know what team would be interested.
Right.
Maybe pull off a 3-team trade with the Clippers, and then they'd get Blake Griffin.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Or if it's not DeMarcus Cousins getting traded, I'm almost certain Rudy Gay is going to be shipped out.
Okay.
They are playing a very they're doing solid. Ty Lawson's having kind of a comeback year, but I'm going to say pretender just because the second half of the season for them is such a huge question mark.
Yeah, they won again last night, and they beat the Nuggets by 7. It was 120 to 113. The reason I think that they're a pretender as well, due to the fact that I think ultimately at some point this season they're just going to blow up. They're playing relatively well, better than we usually see of the Sacramento Kings. But at some point, I think this roster is just going to self-destruct, and like you said, somebody somewhere is going to get moved.
Yeah.
A question for you, I was going to ask in your explanation when you're talking about possibly trading DeMarcus Cousins. One of the guys that kept saying he wants to play with them. What about him going to Washington?
I could see that.
Go back to John Wall.
With John Wall, that's certainly a possibility. Of course, the Wizards would have to trade away Gortat.
Right.
I think that's possible. You could see a trade there. What was the team I was thinking about? Portland, maybe?
Okay, that would be nuts for
them,
him and Lillard.
Yeah, seeing them. I mean, they would probably have to trade either Alan Crabb or Mo Harkless. Two guys that they gave a lot of money to this offseason. But, yeah, I think that's possible.
Which takes us to our next team. The number 9 team is the Portland Trail Blazers right now in the West. They're 15-21. Can they get this ship righted? Are they going to be the contender for that 8th spot?
When you talk about all these bubble teams, I think Portland is the best, so I'm going to say contender. I think they have too much talent to be 15-21 right now. They have some awesome shooters in McCollum and Crabb, and right now their problem is down low. Festus Ezeli really is kind of struggling right now.
Yeah.
And their Plumlee hasn't. I mean, I don't think he's not starter quality.
Right.
So they need somebody down low, somebody like they had in LaMarcus Aldridge, who can really control the paint, and somebody like Cousins maybe.
Right. Yeah. I think so as well, and I think that they also have the best player of any of those teams. Again, Damian Lillard.
That's true.
Did I miss something here? I went and looked at the box scores last night. Damian Lillard did not play.
Okay.
I don't think. Is he hurt? Did I miss something here?
I don't think so. I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Well, it was news to me, too. I did not see him in the box score. But, yeah,
I believe they've been resting him. I think they rest him every once in a while.
Maybe that's what it was. But, yeah, I think he's the best player. I mean, he's a bona fide all-star, an elite player in the NBA that can kind of get this team fixed, so to speak, from the record that they have. If he gets hot, that team's going to get hot. I mean, that's just what it is going to come down to. And they have the most talent of any of the 3 teams that I have here that are possible bubble teams, which takes us to our last bubble team, your Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, the Mavericks.
I will say, I've been paying attention a little bit more, and they have been playing well. Dirk has been slowly coming back.
Very slowly but surely.
But they've been playing well.
They have been playing well. I'm going to say pretender because I did give that 8th spot to Portland. But, I mean, Harrison Barnes, if he plays like this, he will be on the All-Star team. Wesley Matthews has been doing great. And, he's finally 100% after that Achilles injury. And he's playing at his full potential. Seth Curry has been awesome on the bench. We've been starting him every once in a while. But the problem with them is they need a point guard and they need a center.
Yeah. I'm going pretender as well because I gave it to Portland. But I think for a team that could have that second half get hot run, especially with Dirk coming back, could be Dallas. Dallas could be that team that gets it fixed before everybody else. And I like their bench. I know Devin Harris had a huge game again last night or the night before with 17 points.
And they've been playing Andrew Bogut off the bench, or they've been playing him out. They're starting Dirk at center now with Harrison Barnes at the 4, and then I believe Wes Matthews at the 3 and Seth Curry at the 2.
Okay.
So and then they've also been playing Dorian Finney-Smith
Yes.
And he's been doing great. I'm very probably the best undrafted rookie this year.
Yeah, he is. I was a big fan of his at Florida. But yeah, Dallas has been getting it to turn around a little bit.
Yeah.
This past weekend, New Year's weekend, was a big weekend for college football.
Yep.
Their playoff games, all the big games came. The New Year's Six, so to speak. Did you get to watch any of those games?
I did. I obviously watched the Badgers game. Was very pleased.
Yep.
So yeah.
Well, let's start there.
Sure.
Did you take? I mean, you said you were pleased, obviously, by the win. But for me, I think that two things were answered. Wisconsin is a team that is good enough to be a New Year's Six team and win these elite bowl games. And they were the only team for the Big Ten to win in the New Year's Six, which makes a statement for them. But this also proves that Western Michigan with P.J. Fleck is a very, very good team that could become the next version of Boise State. I mean, if he stays, is that?
I thought he was going to Minnesota.
Is he for sure leaving?
That's what you told me.
Well, he was the name that was.
Oh, I thought you said he was going.
No announcement.
I don't know. I mean, that's up to him. But I think Wisconsin, what showed me is that they can be a balanced offense. Right. I think teams that beat Wisconsin are usually teams that can just stop the run, and that's it. They don't have to worry about the pass. They had a great passing offense.
They had one incomplete pass the entire game.
Yeah, that's great, and it was from their best receiver or the best offensive player of the game, Troy Fumagalli, who, looked like Jason Witten out there. Yeah. And even though they kind of went back and forth, mostly with Bart Houston, who's now graduating, right. They have a very good young quarterback in Alex Hornibrook.
Yeah, I completely agree. Did you catch any of the playoff games?
I did not.
Okay. Alabama, I think a lot of people expected them to blow out Washington because they've kind of been head and shoulders above everybody else. But that was a close game. And I think it showed a lot about Washington, that Washington is kind of now the Oregon, kind of took over for Oregon a little bit. And that they can be that elite team in the country to compete and be in the playoffs every year. But what made that game and made Washington look even better was Clemson throttled Ohio State.
Yeah.
31-0, which just made everything look bad. A lot of people, not only was it bad for Ohio State, but then a lot of backlash came about the Big Ten and the quality of teams in the Big Ten and possibly being overhyped, that a team like an Ohio State that didn't win their conference championship got into the playoff and lost 31-0. You have a grim face.
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous because people have been talking this entire season how the Big Ten is the best conference in the nation. You can't go back now after Ohio State losing 31-0. In my opinion, if I were running the playoff, Penn State would have been playing in that game.
Okay. And Penn State, did you watch the Rose Bowl?
Yes, and it was a very close game. And I think, obviously, that last pass it was not a very good pass. It wasn't smart. If that was a quarterback, if that was a senior quarterback rather than a sophomore quarterback, he wouldn't be making that throw.
Right.
They would have made it into overtime, and I think in overtime Penn State would have beaten USC. That's just my opinion.
Right.
But anyways, you can't go back and saying that the Big Ten's overhyped because they did have some very good teams. You saw Wisconsin handle Western Michigan.
Right.
And Michigan did lose, but I think
played without their top two players.
Right.
Real Preppers didn't play, and Jake Butt tore his ACL.
Right. Yeah. So and Iowa lost to Florida pretty badly, but I think those top four teams in the Big Ten are good teams, and I think a lot of them have returning players coming next season.
Right, and one of the things you talked about Florida, but a lot of how good quote unquote conferences are is totally based on how they do in the bowl season.
Yeah,
and everybody wants to talk about the SEC. especially ESPN, which a lot of people have retermed as ESECPN because of the bias that they can have. But, I mean, the SEC didn't seem to dominate that much this year. Do you think that besides Alabama, who's kind of, I guess, ahead of everybody else, that this parity maybe across the land of college football can keep the Power 5 conferences from separating and maybe there's a little bit more equality going forward with the playoffs where a team like maybe a Western Michigan eventually can get a shot to prove themselves in a national playoff?
I mean, I guess in that what you're saying, I guess there is parity, except Alabama's winning the championship every year.
Right. Because
they run the recruiting in the SEC now. Yeah. I mean, there's no longer a recruiting battle in Florida with Miami, Florida State, and Florida because Alabama's getting all those guys now. Yeah. And, forget about Auburn, forget about LSU because Nick Saban has taken over the southeastern region of the United States.
If he walks into somebody's home, that kid is committed. Yeah. I mean, it's almost to that point.
I mean, yeah, and so it's, I mean, with LSU hiring Ed Orgeron as head coach, that doesn't give me much faith that things are going to change.
Right.
I think the only other head coach right now that maybe stands a shot against Nick Saban recruiting is Ken Sumlin and Texas A&M, and I don't know if he's going to be staying for very long.
Right.
I think it would be smart for him to head over to the NFL.
Right, and one of the crazy things that I saw with SEC recruiting as well, I can't remember who Tennessee played, but I watched their game. And Nebraska, they played Nebraska, and they are the 11th ranked recruiting class in the country. Tennessee is, and they're like 5th in the SEC, which is absolutely insane that a team can have a borderline top 10 recruiting class and be number 5 in their own conference. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, it speaks to, I guess, but like you said, with Nick Saban, it doesn't matter where you're from. If Nick Saban shows up, consider it a done deal.
Right, and I think when you talk SEC versus Big Ten, I think SEC has good recruiting because, in that area, and I think you can also include Texas in that. Yeah. That's where all the big high school football teams are.
Right.
That's where they live and breathe football.
Right.
And so you're going to get good players, good recruiting. With the Big Ten, you look at the top 4 Big Ten teams, and those are some of the best coaches in the entire nation.
Right.
All 4 of them. Yeah. Jim Harbaugh, Urban Meyer, Paul Chryst, and James Franklin.
Right. And I mean, even to go beside that, even though they had a down year, I think you could throw Mark D'Antonio in there from Michigan State, who is usually one of the best teams in the country as well.
And Lovie Smith.
Yeah. Hopefully can get that Illinois turned around. But yeah, I think, let me ask you this. In terms of a collective group, with that Power 5 and them talking about possibly the Power 5 disbanding from the rest of the pack. Is that a smart decision? Will that ruin the NCAA? Will it ruin college sports as a whole because of the money driving football? Or does NCAA need to fix this and find a way to keep everything together?
I think if they decide to disband, either two things are going to happen. One, which is something you brought up, it's going to be a whole different level of football, as in Power 5, then FBS, FCS, D2,
D3,
blah 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 blah. Or something that I think that could happen is every team from every division, the MAC, the MWC, the WAC, all of them end up joining one of those Power 5 conferences.
Okay.
And deeming all those other conferences obsolete.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously they want to run the show. They don't want to be part of the NCAA.
Right.
And I guess I kind of understand that because players are unhappy of all the rules and stuff, and that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So, but to disband completely from the rest of the competition, that's going to put a stranglehold on recruiting altogether because, forget about a big time player like Corey Davis going to Western Michigan,
right?
Because he's going to want to play with the best teams, and he's going to want to go to the SEC or the Big Ten.
And I think a lot of things that you could also see too is we get a lot of these guys. For example, we'll use Wisconsin with Ryan. Is it Ramczyk, the left tackle?
Ramczyk, yeah.
Ramczyk. He was recruited by Paul Chryst at Pittsburgh and ended up going to Stevens Point instead because Wisconsin did not recruit him. He wanted to stay closer to home. And then Paul Chryst came to Wisconsin, and Ramczyk he transferred to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And I think that's something which you bring up with Corey Davis is a very valid point that with guys being able to transfer levels and almost be eligible immediately, that a guy like Corey Davis who might possibly be overlooked at that Power 5 level, you probably are more likely to see more guys transfer.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
If they blow up at that mid-level and say, you know what, I want to go be in that Power 5.
Well, yeah, and it's really similar to players starting out in JUCO and going.
Right.
Aaron Rodgers is probably the most famous answer to that.
Right. Yeah, it's just going to be an absolute wreck. But speaking of how you're talking about with rules in the NCAA, the Minnesota Golden Gophers, we kind of just talked about fired their head coach because he supported his players in boycotting the bowl game. Minnesota went 9-4 this year. They still ended up winning that bowl game despite everything that was going on off the field. They had suspended some players because of a sexual assault case or something had happened off the field. But none of the players had actually been charged, or there was nothing deemed final yet.
Yeah.
And the NCAA had made decisions, and where Minnesota got upset was they thought that the NCAA was taking too much power into their hands and making decisions before having all of the answers, so to speak, and stood up for themselves. And the boosters got upset and fired their head coach.
Right.
Do you think that the head coach has the right to say, I'm going to believe in my players, where the boosters shouldn't be getting upset? Or did the boosters have the right to say, well, that's just dumb. These players are suspended. That's final. I guess both could be positive or negative.
Right.
Here.
I mean, in my opinion, I don't see what's wrong with a coach supporting his players in something they believe in.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's just ridiculous to see a coach, get fired for that. It's kind of, it shows that he's actually a good coach.
Right.
Reminds me when Northwestern kind of started to protest on whether or not they should be paid, and saying they should be paid. And Coach Pat Fitzgerald said, "Hey, I support them. If they want to, get paid, I think that's great. Get some kind of compensation." And then they were like, "Well, Coach, that would probably be coming out of your paycheck." And then he did a whole 180. He's like, "Well, I don't know. Let's talk about this." But yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of sad that a booster club, they're really only thinking about, well, if our guys aren't playing, then what's the point?
So let me ask you: do you think that governing bodies like that, such as a Roger Goodell, an Adam Silver, an NCAA, have too much power? That there needs to be other bodies put in place that, kind of like our president. Our president can get vetoed.
Right. I think that has a lot to do with this whole Power 5 disbanding from the NCAA. They want to have their own kind of Congress.
Right.
So, yeah, I think maybe in a situation like that, maybe the Big Ten gets involved or something. But I think, really something needs to change.
Yeah, I completely agree. Staying in the college ranks, but switching sports here, probably the biggest news of last week, Coach K will be having back surgery and will be missing some time here. And immediately two things came to mind. One was the Golden State Warriors, how the whole situation with Steve Kerr had happened, where he had to step away for, I believe it was surgery as well.
Yeah.
And Luke Walton stepped in. And it was kind of, well, this is what Golden State would look like without Coach Kerr, if they were still able to win without him, and also propelled Luke Walton to now ultimately the head job with the Lakers. And immediately brought me to my mind of well, we're going to get to see Duke for the first time in our life without Coach K.
Yeah.
And if Jeff Capel can get back to being a head coach at the college level again.
Yeah, I think obviously Coach K is going to have a huge influence on the team no matter what they do, kind of like how Coach Kerr did with Golden State. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens there, just because, I mean, Coach K is one of the best coaches of all time in any sport.
Right. Yeah. And, not with just Duke, but a lot of teams. North Carolina was in a close game last night against Clemson. I don't know if you caught the Indiana-Wisconsin game, but that was another close game. And it seems to be that these teams are getting closer and closer and closer. And we keep talking about college or parity in college sports. Is parity better for March Madness, do you think, and have more teams that are kind of on the bubble, so to speak? Or is it better when we have those definitive teams that say, these teams are elite, these are our great teams, and these are the teams we want to see?
I mean, I think parity is always better for anything. It's right now for the NBA, I'm not excited for the playoffs because I know who's going to be in the finals.
Right.
And everybody's like, well, that means we're going to have another greatest NBA finals of all time. Well, yeah, I mean, that means you get 6 or 7 good games.
Right.
I'd rather want 20, 30 good games.
Yeah.
Which, and I think for March Madness, I think you're always going to get some kind of parity because there's always going to be some Cinderella team out there. Who it is, we don't know. That's what makes it exciting.
Yep.
So, no matter what, saying that, the Kentuckys and the Dukes and North Carolina, they're going to pull away, well, we'll see about that.
Right, yeah. And, you had just mentioned, we're going to get another great finals. Obviously, these sporting agencies or companies drive on TV ratings. That's how they get a lot of their money. Eventually at some point, I think that if you continue to see something like a Golden State versus Cleveland Cavaliers every year for a couple of years, those ratings aren't going to go up.
No.
I think eventually that they start to drop because we've seen this story before.
Absolutely.
And I think that was also similar with the Miami Heat, where we were seeing the Miami Heat every year. People are just like, well, I've seen this before.
I mean, and if there wasn't a team as dominant as, the Cavaliers or the Warriors, we could see a team like, the New York Knicks sneak in.
Right.
I mean, who maybe on any other year would have an actual shot of making the finals, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. And not only in New York Knicks, but I guess being from Wisconsin, we get that small market. Not to say necessarily the Bucks being a team that could compete, but a team maybe like a Charlotte Hornet that
for sure,
that can make that run with a little bit more parity. They're a little more rounded of a team, or a Memphis Grizzly coming from a smaller city.
Right, and you even talk about the Los Angeles Clippers, who, I mean, a team stacked with talent right now, and they don't have a shot now at all. I mean, you put them against the Warriors in a best-of-7 series, they don't stand a chance. They're going to be out in 5.
Well, and not only that, but they can't keep their players healthy.
Right. Well, that too.
So, I mean, that's just something that they have to figure out.
Yeah.
So, that's all I have.
That's all you have?
That is all I have.
All right.
There has not been a lot of breaking news.
We're at about an hour, too. So
ooh, that went really fast.
That went by very fast. But, yeah, anyways, thank you so much for listening.
Yes.
Remember to go on mysports.com for some awesome original content, original articles. Be sure to watch the Steve Smith video me and Richie put out yesterday. Yep. Some fun highlights on there. Remember to like us on Twitter.
Or Facebook.
Yeah, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got a lot of fun stuff going.
Oh, yeah, lots of stuff.
Richie, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben.
And everybody else, have a great rest of your week.